All right, this is 15-Minute Email Academy, and I'm Bob Serling, and today my guest is Perry Marshall. And it's kind of hard to introduce Perry in just a few sentences because there's so many great things I could say about him. But to keep it brief, Perry is one of the most respected, highly paid, and highly sought after business consultants in the world. He's been endorsed by Forbes magazine, by Inc. magazine, and by hundreds of the most respected entrepreneurs worldwide. He's also, I think the most interesting thing is that Perry has pioneered two major movements in modern marketing. The first is what he did with his books on Google AdWords, which really laid the foundation for the $100 billion pay-per-click market. And the techniques he continues to pioneer in that area are really the gold standard for pay-per-click. Then the second thing he did was turn the term 80-20 into a verb. And by that, I mean, he's shown business owners that 80-20 isn't the way you think about your business. It's actually the actions that you take in operating your business. And his book, 80-20 Sales and Marketing, is required reading in many corporations. And on top of all of that, Perry really excels at writing compelling emails, which is what we're here to talk about today. So with that introduction, welcome, Perry.
Thank you. It's great to be on. And, Bob, you've had a varied and celebrated career. So it's an honor to be here. And hey, let's give some people some insight on how to make emails. I mean, email is still the holy grail. It's still the most valuable way to reach people after you with all the other stuff.
And that's why I created this series. Okay, so let me take a second to bring up your email on the screen here. And there we go. Okay, so can you see the email there, Perry?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So now I have the easy job because I've actually written out my questions, and then you have the hard work. So I am going to refer to them so I make sure I get everything in. So the first question, let's just talk about the strategy. What's the goal of this email?
Well, I think the most important thing I could tell you about this is that this is an example of the latent capability that it took other people to get me to see. So the story of the email is kind of, I think, the point. So, people know me for 80-20, they know me for pay-per-click and all of this. Meanwhile, I quietly woo them all in by writing emails, and it's one of my superpowers. And so I was running Dan Kennedy's Titanium meeting, which is quite an honor because, Dan's a pretty high mojo guy. And the youngest member of the group goes, "Perry, I just want to watch you write an email." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Boy, I don't know. I thought you'd want me to come in, dissect some giant strategy or whatever, is what I do. She goes, "No, I just want to watch what happens when you write an email." And so I came back to the next meeting. I go, "So here, let's do it." And so I sat down at the computer. She stood up in the front, and I started asking her questions. And it was magical. But it was this magic that only went on privately inside of my head between me and my computer keyboard every day, normally. But so we got into this, and they're like, "Wait a minute. What made you say that? Why did you ask?" And some of it was just seeing the questions that I would answer, because I would reach and dig for stuff, and they'd answer a question I wouldn't be quite satisfied with, and I go, "Well, wait, that's not enough." And by the end of it, everybody, I get a big applause from the room, and wow, that was amazing. I'm like, wow, I had no idea that watching Perry write an email would actually be interesting.
Well, that's great, because not only are you training them, but you're getting great feedback on what really works and what motivates people.
Right. And so okay, so what does this have to do with everybody? Well, I find that most of our superpowers are so right in front of our nose that we just can't see them. It's like if your superpower is on the end of your nose, but you never ever look at the end of your nose. And I just got to ask people, like, how many things do you do really amazingly well that you don't even realize other people would want to know about? And that story is going to be intrinsic to almost any copywriting situation that you encounter.
Yeah, yeah. I think we all take for granted what our natural gifts are, and it's so easy to, because they are natural and they seem easy, but they're difficult for other people. So
And your clients do that too, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the strategy? So the goal was, I mean, your goal was to teach people how to write email, but in the email itself, what's the goal you want to achieve with your reader, and what's the strategy you're using to do that?
Well, we got a really high open rate with the subject line. My friend Jack Bourne, my marketing manager, came up with that. And, you know, I got emails from a couple of friends who thought I was like pushing the line a little too risque. I'm like, well, probably you need to irritate a couple of people, if, you know, or else you're just not being interesting enough.
Yeah.
And you know, something that we very often do is we'll put a little classified ad at the top of the email, like you see here. Like a lot of people, they'll just open an email and click on the first thing they see, and so that's a real, like, half of a second knee-jerk thing.
Yeah.
So we put that there at the top. I think that's a useful thing, and then you can scroll down and maybe we can talk about.
Okay, but let's go through it block by block, though, so
Sure.
it's cohesive. So, you know, the subject line is great. I got nervous when she wanted to watch, and let me tell you what the most opened line I've ever used, and I've used it multiple times for a service I sell, is what I taught the French about romance, and, and it has to do with a marketing campaign I wrote for a guy who's French, and he teaches French men how to date more effectively. So there's just, you know, there's this curiosity factor there that just drives people. And I'm sure that's the same thing with your subject line, that, I mean, people want, what the heck is he talking about?
Yeah. So keep going here.
Okay, and then I want to talk about what you said. So block number 2 that I've marked is what you call the classified ad, and what we used to call in direct mail a slug line. And it was a line that was above the copy that really told you what was going on. And sometimes it made an offer and sometimes it didn't, because of course in direct mail you didn't have links you have like you do in email. But this is really powerful and almost nobody uses it. Can you talk about the kind of results this produces for you?
Well, I do a number of things with this the slug followed by a link. One of them is, well, a lot of people will just click on it. It's like, get to the point, okay? And you can click there and a video starts, and that's great. Another really common way, though, that I do this with this is I'll send out an email that's just a nice big piece of content, but I'll put an ad for something that I'm promoting at the top, and then it's just like advertising. And what I want to say about that is that I think a lot of marketers like have their content to pitch ratio is not very good. Like, it's all pitch and no content. And after a while, people stop reading your emails. So my formula is 80% content, 20% pitch, which could be, it could be even within one email. I mean, maybe it is a pitch, but there still has to be something in there that it pays its own freight.
Right.
It was worth opening and reading, even if they don't want to buy anything today. that the edification they get out of it exceeds the irritation. I mean, when you ask people for money and they don't give you money, that's irritating, right? So you're making a subtraction from the emotional bank account. You know, like Stephen Covey says, you want to be making more deposits, and that's actually the most important way that I use that. Or just this week, there was something I needed. Like I was looking for a needle in the haystack. I want somebody who can help me with X. And I just had, we just stuck that at the top of an email, and then people send you then they respond to it. Or, if you, we've only got 2 seats left for Roundtable this year. And if you want one of them, you need to email Tiffany or call her at this number, and then you go on with the rest of the mess.
Right. Okay. So let's scroll down a little. What I've labeled block number 3 here is really kind of the bulk of the message. So can you describe what you're doing in these first few short paragraphs leading up to the next block that I've labeled number 4?
Well, that first paragraph turned into a huge hit. People still raving about it. Well, it was true. Here's a story behind the story about this email. We've done all kinds of programs and all kinds of promotions, and most of them, once they're done, like, they're forgotten forever. And we did something super useful. I had my staff export a spreadsheet out of Infusionsoft of all the emails we sent and what the open rates and what the click-through rates were over like the last 5 years or something. And I started sorting them by different columns, and this one came out near the top. And it had a really high click-through rate too. And I looked at this like, hey, wait a minute. How come we're not selling this? Okay? Like, now I got it. Like, whatever you paid to be involved in this course here with Bob, I mean, if you just ask yourself that one question, like, what thing from 2014 that was really good have you completely forgotten about? And you can export reports from these email programs, and they'll tell you stuff. Absolutely. Like, hey, man, resurrect this thing. So that's what I did. The other thing was, doggone it, I was running Dan Kennedy's $26,000 meeting. I went on, forgot about that. I haven't been bragging about that either. And like, I don't know if this theme has come out enough times in our conversation, but man, if I do this, how much is everybody else doing this? Like, most of us are not putting our best piece of steak on the platter. Most of us are like, hey, man, I made these cupcakes, like, hey, what about that awesome steak, that recipe that you got? Like, and I just think a lot of people are doing that mistake.
Great. So you took something that has really resonated with the people in your courses and your list and your community, and you realize, hey, wait a minute, this resonates. Let's hit on it more often, and let's build something to sell around it. So that's great.
No doubt, yeah.
Great. Okay, so block number 4 to me is kind of the payoff to the reader, because it really tells them what's in it for them. Can you tell? And it's very short. Maybe I'll just read it. It says, they learn more about on-the-spot copywriting from watching me do it in 1 hour than from stacks of copywriting books. And so that very directly implies that they did and you can too. And I mean, I think it's just a great way to hit that benefit very simply and very clearly.
Well, it was so true because, in this program, we got people that I had never talked to, and we just put them on the webinar, and Jack said, go. And like, I don't know anything about their business. I have to start from scratch, and I have to start asking questions. And so for people to actually see the interview process with all these hundreds of people watching me, they paid for this, right? It's like the pressure's on. So I'm doing it. And there was this one point where I asked a guy a question. And it was basically about his business turned the corner. and he came home. It was like the first time in probably 2 years he'd come home to his wife with a success story.
Wow.
Because you know how it is,
Sure.
getting beat up and doing a startup. And like, she was proud of him. And I started asking him about this. He got choked up. Right. And it was like, I pulled that out of him, so then I'm writing. I actually, when my wife smiled at me, I was almost in tears. Right. And this just comes tumbling out of a live well, you don't get that from a copywriting book. A
Yeah.
copywriting book doesn't cry.
Absolutely. All right. So then the final block 5, is the call to action. And I love the way you structured it. Isn't this is only available so long, or if you want to get in on this, it's so written in person to person English. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. I really just wanted people to go watch this thing, and we actually give a lot of content here. I mean, I think, I don't remember, there might be a whole hour of content that they get for free before they even have to pay for it. And I felt so good about what we're doing. It was like, hey, I could make a huge deposit in your emotional bank account just by giving this thing away, right? And I love it when I can do that, because yeah, we still get sales out of it. But yeah, want a free sample, get it here now. And I think calls to action need to just be really simple. They need to be lizard brain. If you put that in a grader, it's going to say that's like second grade, man. Like really low reading level. Homer Simpson totally understands what you're doing.
Right. Right. And that you can't have a better call to action than something that's that clear. Well, this has been a great tour of this email, Perry. I really thank you. And I just want to wrap up by having you tell people how they can find out more about you and what you do.
Well, you know what? Why don't you just go to perrymarshall.com/LOPS hyphen free hyphen sample and go get that exact thing. I think that would be perfect. And of course, you'll be on my website. You can go look around at stuff.
Absolutely. What could be better? Okay, well, great. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom today, Perry. I know how busy you are, and I really appreciate that you took the time to do this.
I really am honored that you put me on the series, because you got some badass copywriters in your world. So it's really nice to be included. Thank you.
It's been my honor and pleasure. Thank you.